What I want to do with our conversation is really kind of get a Lyn Alden audit of where we're at in Bitcoin today from a savings technology and then from a payments technology standpoint, because she is an expert at being able to go in there and look at things from a unbiased point of view and just kind of very reasonable perspective. So on the savings technology side, there's this debate that I think is currently happening between ossification, and there's a whole lot of work that still needs to be done on layer one. I'm kind of curious where you sit in that debate, and then if you were going to audit that or talk about things that maybe you think do need to be done, what would those look like?
So I think the near immutability of Bitcoin is one of the most important features about it. And an analogy that I've given before is if you picture, say, the US Constitution, we can probably all envision ways to make it better. Like we can add another 10 Bill of Rights, right? We can add extra protections for individual liberty that we could add to the Constitution. And in our own way, we would consider that a better document than it is now. But if we could easily change that document, even slightly for the better, it would inherently be a worse document just due to the fact that it's easy to change. Because if good things can be added to it, it means good things can be subtracted from it, bad things can be added to it. So the fact that it's extremely hard to change, like there hasn't been a new amendment in decades, and can you imagine getting an amendment passed today? Like you need a supermajority in Congress and a supermajority of states to pass an amendment. And Bitcoin's kind of like that in digital form, in the sense that we can imagine little tweaks that we can think would maybe make it slightly better, but we have to balance that with the risks involved. And the fact that it's hard to change is like a very large portion of its value. That's why we hold Bitcoin versus any of the million other cryptos out there that they can change all the time, because of that decentralization, because of that hardness. And if Bitcoin wasn't as large as it is now, due to people wanting to hold it, it would probably have a lot less developer funding, a lot less ecosystem development. The fact that it's as big as it is and as liquid as it is what allows all the development to happen on it. And if you were to threaten that immutability, you would risk fewer people wanting to hold it. So I view it conservatively, where there should be a very large consensus before you consider even like a low-risk change.
How about covenants when we're talking about layer one? What are your thoughts around that?
So I find them interesting. I think
define it for folks that if they're not familiar with what a covenant is.
Covenants are ways that you can do like an on-chain vault and things like that. Like you can kind of put certain restrictions on spending that allows you a little bit of limited programmability. It's one of the potential scaling mechanisms, or it's better custody and stuff like that. It's one of the more popular soft fork proposals. I think that's one of the more interesting avenues compared to some of the other ones. But there's different covenant proposals, and there's no clear consensus on which one. So I'm more in the camp of conservatism.
So yesterday, I looked at the mempool. We were down to about 8 blocks left before the mempool was completely clean, gone. We were down to just 1 block in the mempool. That's the trend that it was going. I looked today, and now we got 60 blocks deep in the mempool. It appears somebody went in there and just filled the mempool with these transactions with 1 sat per VB, and just kind of basically DDS the mempool. Are there concerns as to what impact that would have? How much of a threat something like that is at a larger scale if a government would get involved to try to clog the mempool? What are some of your thoughts around that?
Well, so Adam Back invented Hashcash as a defense against spam. I mean, proof of work is basically making it costly to attack the network. And so the fact that Bitcoin generally, most angles of attack on Bitcoin cost something, and it feeds the network, like it feeds the miners. And so there are attacks that would be concerning in the sense that, like in the very beginning, Satoshi was worried that it was too small of a network to get attention too quickly, right? So if you're attacked by a bigger adversary than you're ready for, that could be a concern. So there are certain spam attacks from the U.S. military or something that would be so dramatic. But in general, most realistic attacks, the systems so far, 15 years almost of being well resilient to come back from any attack that happens. Most attacks make it stronger. Like when Mt. Gox happened, that kind of spurred more interest in things like hardware wallets, which helped decentralize custody more and give people more options compared to what they were previously using. And so if there were an attack like that, I think it would help spur second layer development probably faster. And it would feed the miners. So I think that there are still attacks that are, I think, concerning, but so far it's been a very robust system.
What would you say to somebody that's looking at like a sovereign entity stepping in and they want to attack the network? Let's say it's the U.S. government or someone over in Europe that has a ton of fiat firepower and they just want to spam the network and make it above the threshold of a wire transfer of, call it $30 to transact because they have so much fiat firepower behind them to blow out the mempool. Is that something that you see as a real threat, or are sovereigns going to join us instead of fighting us at a certain point?
I can imagine the headlines if the Pentagon was spending money to like spam Bitcoin. Can you imagine that breaking like news and people like going to Congress and then having the testimony about like why are we spending taxpayer dollars on trying to spam the mempool? Yeah. So there is like a social feedback mechanism against that type of thing. And if they tried to do it covertly and then got found out from all like the on-chain detectives trying to point to evidence and things like that. So I think that's one of those lower risk things. But when you do theorize what are the attack surfaces, I mean, Bitcoin has a long history of people thinking very deeply about risks because thinking deeply about those risks is what helps minimize the probability that they happen.